To those who are living in limbo, waiting desperately to learn the fate of a loved one, especially to families of the hostages, you're not alone. We're working with partners throughout the region, pursuing every avenue to bring home those who are being held captive by Hamas. I can't speak publicly about all the details, but let me assure you, for me, as the American president, there's no higher priority than the release and safe return of all these hostages.
During a visit to Tel Aviv today, President Biden made a clear promise to hundreds of families of Hamas hostages. They're not alone, and there is no higher priority for the U.S. than their safe return. I'm joined now by Udi Goren, whose cousin Tal is one of those hostages. He was kidnapped after attempting to fight off Hamas terrorists at his kibbutz. Udi, thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with what you know so far. Have you heard from Tal since his abduction?
Thank you, Alicia, for having me on and being able to tell Tal's story. We haven't heard anything from Tal in the past 12 days. And actually, we don't really know what has happened since he was a part of the emergency squad of his kibbutz. He was one of the first people to tackle the terrorists, and they worked in pairs. So him and his brother-in-law were a pair that went to confront the terrorists, and at some point connection was lost, and ever since then we nor the other people of the emergency squad know what had happened. Our hopes are that since his mobile phone was traced to Gaza, that he is alive and has been captured. So right now we're at a point that the best case scenario is that he is alive and being held hostage.
Tal, your mother's family was living on that kibbutz. You texted with them during Hamas's attack. Just talk us through what that was like.
It was gut-wrenching for us because as we were texting with them as they were in the bomb shelters, as two of my uncles were actually arm wrestling with terrorists on the outside, inside their home. When they're in the bomb shelter, they're arm wrestling to keep the handle closed so they wouldn't break in. So we didn't know that this was happening at the time, but we kept texting. We knew that they are there. We knew that things were going on. They're very tough people. So as we were texting, they left the details out, also for reasons of security. God knows what else Hamas was doing on social media or, tracing WhatsApp messages. So we didn't really know what was going on. The same as most people in Israel weren't aware of what was going on in these several hours, but they were in the bomb shelters for at least 12 hours.
Udi, you've been critical of the Israeli response, the global response to this attack, writing, quote, "Seeking revenge is understandable, but it is not a policy." Tell me more.
I think that what should be leading us, Israel, is to think what is in our interest. And I think President Biden put it very well. You played several of his clips stating that he cares for the hostages. He cares about human life. In his first speech, when this occurred, he said that the value that we place on human life and human dignity, that's what makes us who we are. And I couldn't agree more, because and I speak also for Tal's family, we don't seek retaliation, we don't seek revenge. The Gazan people, the Gazan civilians are not responsible for their government's doing. And I want to ask the question every day, is what we're doing right now, that we keep bombing Gaza, is this in our interest? Does this provide us more certainty of our lives? Does this provide us a way that would bring the hostages back alive? We have suffered, Israel has suffered 1,300 losses. It really is the worst day of the nation of Israel, the worst day we've ever known. And we still have a chance to keep that number at 1,300 and not turn it into 1,500, because we have about 200 hostages. Elderly, people who are sick with chronic diseases, children, young children, infants. And it is right now still in our hands to bring them back home. And if we all agree, and I think we all agree, that Hamas has complete disregard for human lives, ours and Gazans, then we should be the one proactively advancing the return of the hostages. And I want to plead President Biden to keep promoting this message and to keep stating that human lives matter. All human lives matter. As far as I'm concerned, there are 200 more tragedies that are still preventable. You know, Israel is right now on the verge of taking a major decision. Are we going to go in to the ground invasion? And I am certain it has value in the strategic level. But if we do this, what would be our chances to bring these people back home in whenever, how long it takes? Are they going to still be there? Are they still going to be alive? Are they going to stay unharmed? Again, I think President Biden was just spot on with saying that following 9/11, the response that the U.S. had made some mistakes, and I want to add to Congressman Moskowitz's remark and say that the actions that Hamas took, he mentioned his Holocaust surviving grandmother. What Hamas did is touch upon every basic fear that an Israeli has, that the Jew has. It's very true. Their actions were as horrendous as these stories that we heard in ancient history that we thought would never, ever happen again. And they have been able to spark this fear, this very primal fear in us. And this means that we feel, many Israelis feel, that we are under a risk of annihilation. They're coming for us again. But Israel is strong. Israel has one of the most powerful armies in the Middle East. We have the U.S. backing us up. We are not under threat of annihilation. This is the time to make conscious decisions, to make rational decisions, and to put human lives first. The lives of the hostages, the lives of the Israeli civilians that are still suffering from shelling from Gaza and will continue to suffer as long as this war continues, the lives of Gazan civilians, and also, I would say, the lives of the soldiers, that Israeli soldiers that are going to go into the ground invasion. The last few times we went into the Palestinian cities, that we went into Gaza, ended with horrendous tragedies. There's going to be more loss of life. There's going to be hundreds of soldiers that would suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder that Israel is dealing with daily. And I would again stress this message for Tal's family, for myself. We don't seek revenge. We don't seek retaliation. We want to stress the point that human lives matter, and there's still a decision to be made.
Udi Gordon, I want to thank you so much for your time as you process your own grief. Thank you.